One of the more popular books in the construction industry in recent years is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. And the reason why is because the principles described there by the former Naval SEAL commanders apply very closely to the challenges that are experienced in construction on a daily basis. And it's interesting, if you've read the book, you know that a lot of the action, so to speak, takes place in Ramadi around 2006. And you may be wondering, what was it like for the folks who were on the ground, who Jocko and Leif were leading? And today on Construction Genius, you're going to find out, because one of my two guests is Jeremy Beal. He is the co-founder and chief leadership officer of Radix Services. And we're joined by him and Peter Worhunsky, the co-founder and president of Radix Services. And Peter and Jeremy, along with Erica Beal, have recently launched Radix Services, which is a large-scale civil utility infrastructure construction contractor. And Jeremy is bringing his over 20 years of experience in the SEAL teams to the construction industry now. And he has recently retired after 23 years of faithful and dedicated naval service. We spend a lot of time in this podcast. This one's a little longer than my usual episode. We go over 60 minutes, but I want you to hang in for the whole time, because we go through Jeremy's experience in the SEALs from his days in Buds in 1999, 2000, to his deployment to Iraq, then to Afghanistan, and then into more senior leadership roles in the teams. And we talk about how that experience has shaped the way that he thinks about leadership. And then we have a wonderful back and forth discussion with Jeremy and Peter about how that then applies in the construction industry. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation, and I'd like you just to pay close attention. This is actually Jeremy's first time on a podcast, and he brings a lot of experience and insight that I think you're going to find tremendously helpful. I'm really looking forward to seeing how Peter and Jeremy and Erica grow Radix Services in the coming years. And I'm really grateful that they joined me today on Construction Genius. Feel free to share this episode with other people who you think would benefit from hearing it. And as always, thank you for listening to Construction Genius. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. Jeremy, Peter, welcome to Construction Genius.
Thanks for having us, Eric.
Peter, I think you are the second three-time guest on Construction Genius. Great to have you back on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here.
And Jeremy, it's wonderful to have you on the program as well. I know you and Peter are collaborating in the construction industry and on a number of exciting initiatives. And you've recently retired from a 20-year plus career with the Navy SEALs. And I'd like you just to begin, Jeremy, by taking us through your history in the SEALs. And as you're doing that, I want the audience to be considering how the experience that you have both in the field and in the higher command levels relates to the construction industry. So Jeremy, just introduce yourself, please, to the audience.
Gladly. Thank you, Eric. So I joined the Navy in 1999, right after I graduated high school from a small town about an hour outside of Cleveland, Ohio. I knew I needed to expand my horizons a little bit. So the military always held a real appeal for me. So it was always something I kept going back to as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do after high school. And it really kind of boils down to, like, I just wanted to be part of an elite group of people that did elite stuff. So I got kind of drawn towards naval special warfare and becoming a SEAL, just hearing about who they were, what they did, what they went through, what it took to become one of them. That held a lot of appeal for me.
Let me ask you, Jeremy, was that prior to join the Navy that you were thinking you were intentionally joining the Navy because that was the route into the SEALs, or was that as you had joined the Navy?
I joined the Navy with the intention of getting into naval special warfare. I had talked to all the service branches before deciding on the Navy. I wanted to hear what they all had to say, explore my options. And once I found out that there was a route to get into naval special warfare rather quickly, I was like, all right, sounds good. Sign me up. Let's go.
Where do you think that thought of yours to be with an elite group of people doing elite stuff, where did that come from?
Probably the simplest answer I can give you is I grew up a child of the 80s. I grew up watching G.I. Joe. As strange as it sounds, like, not that I wanted to be a G.I. Joe, but in the sense that I did, because again, they were just an elite group of people that did elite stuff. They were doing the things that no one else wanted to do. And that's just something that always kind of stuck with me. It was really more than a cartoon. It was really just kind of like the teamwork and like just all the stuff that appeals to people. So, and I think I got about as close as I could get to becoming a G.I. Joe with the group that I ultimately came working with. I will say, though, I never saw an episode of G.I. Joe headquarters, never saw it given a strategic budget planning brief, or no one was doing ORM sheets, but I guess that doesn't really sell.
They were men of action as opposed to men of planning.
Yeah. I don't think G.I. Joe HQ would really get warrant high ratings. It was just kind of that mentality of like, I just wanted to be part of something more than just the run of the mill.
Yep. No, I understand. So you joined the Navy and then you went to BUD/S, in April 2000?
I checked into BUD/S training in April 2000 and fortunately made it through. No injuries, no roles in training. So I graduated in April of 2001 and checked into my first command, SEAL Team 3 out here in Coronado, April 18th, 2001.
Wow. What was the biggest challenge for you in BUD/S?
Honestly, probably just staying in the routine and just kind of learning to not overdo too much. Like just what's the task? What's the objective? What do we got to get done? And just grinding until it does, until you get finished with what you need to do.
It's interesting, though, because I've thought about it a bit and watched your YouTube videos on the BUD/S training and all that kind of stuff, and the guys who succeed and the guys who fail. And I was hanging out with you a couple of weeks ago, and I noticed some of the folks there who were at your retirement ceremony, they're just ordinary dudes. A lot of them, they're not like these yoked up 6'3" jocks. I mean, some of them are like that, but a lot of them are just ordinary dudes. Some of them are kind of little, and they're not, oh, wow, that's definitely a Navy SEAL. Why is it that in the SEALs, why do you think those guys who seem to be so strong and so outwardly impressive, why don't they always succeed with the SEALs, do you think?
Honestly, a ton of reasons that have been speculated upon and hypothesized about and everything else. And they've been studying Navy SEAL training since the beginning and like trying to come up with like better metrics of like to predict who's going to be successful and who's not. And while they're getting better at it, they're still just as wide of reasons as you can come up with. This is just my observation, just both time as a student and as an instructor. A lot of times it seems like folks don't really know how to really deal with failure. A lot of those folks that you're talking about, biggest, strongest, always the fastest, they were always the high performers. They were always the captain of the team. They were always this. They were always that. And so now when they're in an environment where they may not be the best at something, or they have to work a little harder to do it, like they've never been met with that challenge before. Because the cold is an amazing equalizer. There's no way to out-tough the cold. If you're not used to that environment, if you're not used to that, or if you've never had to really dig down deep and gut through something, then that's hard for some people to do.
How did you dig down deep and gut through it? How did you do that yourself?
I just knew that was where I wanted to be. And there was really nothing else they could do that was going to make me change my mind on that. So actually, probably for me, the biggest challenge and the thing that held the most apprehension for me going through training, knowing about it before I even came in, was this 50-meter underwater swim that you had to accomplish. You had to jump in, do a somersault, then swim down the pool and back 50 meters underwater, holding your breath. And for some reason, like that was the thing that just got me. I was like, that was the one. And I knew that if I didn't pass it the first time I jumped in the pool, I would probably psychologically I probably would fail at any other attempt right there. That was my best time to probably get it done. So I was like, well, there's an instructor over top of me. I'm not going to drown. So let's just gut through and get it done.
So doing that then, as you were doing that, if you can recall, I know it was many years ago, was there ever a point where you thought in that 50-meter swim, there's just no way I can continue and you just pushed on through? Or were you just singularly focused and you just kept going and going?
Singular focus on the objective. That was it.
And so if you're focused on the objective, that helps to kind of block out the noise and the physical discomfort and all those kinds of things. Is that what worked for you?
I think so. Just something to just help you push past that point.
How long did it take you to realize that physically you're capable of doing way more than you think mentally? You know how people talk about that all the time. We're actually capable of doing way more than we think we are. How long did it take you to reach that point of understanding?
I was confident I was going to pass BUD/S and graduate about an hour into day one. Because I think with a lot of things, the anticipation is always worse than the actual, once you get on the ground, start doing it. We had our day one, PT, I think it started at 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't remember. But within the first hour, we had about 10 or so folks quit in the first hour. And more than a couple of those folks were the ones that you were talking about, like those guys that were run like a deer and swim like a fish. And they were just strong. And they were just, well, I guess they're not going to be here anymore. So I was like, I'm fine. I knew then. I was like, I'm going to be good.
Interesting. So what do you think is the difference between confidence? Because I mean, the first hour in, you're like, yeah, I'm good. I'm going to make this. What's the difference between confidence and cockiness? Cockiness being the negative, the arrogance. What's the difference between confidence and arrogance? How about that?
Well, I think a lot of it is just how much are you making it about you or are you making it about the team? And you can have people that are quiet and cocky and you got other people that are just confident and quiet. There's really no one set way to do it. It's just, if someone's really good and someone's a really high performer, are they talking bad about their other teammates? Are they really about them? Or are they really using their talents and potential to help bring other people along?
So that's an interesting aspect there, because on the one hand, you're the one who's passing buds. You're the one as an individual who's either going to succeed or fail in the terms of going through the training. And yet you also have to bring in that team element. How much did that team element play part in the motivation that you had as you went through the training?
It plays in a huge, huge factor, because one of the things they really hammer home in one of our core tenets of how we do things or the way things should be done. It's first things is in order of precedence. The way you're taking care of stuff is like it's country, team, teammate. So it's keeping things in order. Like what's the ultimate objective? Serve the country. We do the team first, your teammate, and then you. You take care of your team, you take care of other people first, and you worry about you last. Good things tend to happen. Even on a micro level, country teammate, then going to operationally, you're talking about you take care of team gear first, personal gear, and then yourself. You finish the op, you make sure the boats are cleaned and flushed out and put away and salt water off of them. You got all the guns and everything's taken care of, and those have been cleaned and lubed and oiled and put away. Then you take care of your personal gear. Make sure that all your equipment that you might need tomorrow or in a couple hours is back up and ready to go in case it needs to be done, in case you got to go. And then finally, then you get to take off the wetsuit, or you get to change out of the wet clothes, get in the shower, get warmed up, get something to eat. Take care of your equipment, take care of your people, then worry about you. That was beaten into my head very early.
So take us through. You got through BUDS, you're 2001, before 9/11. And so before all that happens, give us a little more about your history as you were involved in the teams.
So I got to the team there in April, went to a few professional schools along the way, and then we formed as a platoon. And right before we started work up and training in January of 2002, 9/11 happened. That changed everything, because our kind of battle rhythm and deployment and the way we've been doing things has been kind of pretty set for the last 20 years, really, since Desert Grenada and then things to the 80s and then Desert Storm. So it's been pretty status quo up until that point. And then 9/11 changed everything. It was a really interesting time to be in, and to be so young, to see it go from an organization that had just been status quo to grow into the organization it's become in the last 20 years. But to see it go all the way from the beginning of that to where it was at its height and to where it is now was incredible to witness.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So then as a result of that, how long was it until you deployed into the battle space that was related to the aftermath of 9/11?
Us personally, we started our workup and training in January of 2002, and we deployed in October 2002. We were over there in the Middle East, and then we were preparing for and then participating in the initial invasion of Iraq in March 19th, 2003 was my first real dip into action.
So as you were going through that process, this happens in every sphere of life, right? There's the theory, the practice, and then the actual. And so as you got into the SEALs, you were obviously doing a combination of theory and practice to begin with, and then some more of the actual. And then obviously I'm assuming as you got into the battle space, that obviously became real. As you got into on the ground fighting and leading troops, what was the biggest change in perspective that you had from the training time to the actual fighting time?
The old cliche, you don't rise to the occasion, you default to your level of training. So it's a really weird thing, but as things start getting more dangerous and more real and more close, they become really simple. You don't really start to worry about too many fancy tactics or maneuvers or whatever. It's just about getting the job done and moving on to the next thing. So keeping things simple, concise, then move fast with a purpose, violence of action, and to achieve the objective.
How did your training help you to manage the emotions of the battlefield? And I'm thinking everything from rage all the way to terror.
The more training you have and the harder your training was, it makes all that stuff, I don't want to say easier, it makes it simpler. You can kind of compartmentalize those things because you know where you're going to go or what you kind of do or what you should do. You have a frame of reference. A lot of times there's the old saying, like, what do you do in a dangerous situation? Where the people, they always say, like, fight or flight response, right? Well, there's also the freeze response, which a lot of times is really people are they kind of brain lock because their brain has no even frame of reference. Like, what do I do in this situation? Because they've never even thought about it. So just having gone through and drilled like this, if this happens, then this, we're going to do this. If something happens here, we're going to do this. And everyone kind of works through those contingencies. So if that happens, like, okay, boom, we're going to shift and everyone's kind of on the same page. And you just drill those simple things one at a time. And it makes it a lot easier to get everyone moving in the right direction once something happens that requires us to pivot or move or do whatever.
Okay, so we're talking here 2004, 2005. Take us back to your flow. From where did you go from there?
We got back from that first deployment in 2003, and then we just went back through another workup and training cycle and deployed again with a different kind of mission and mindset thing that we've been tasked to do. So we knew what we were tasked to do. So we had to then figure out how to acquire the best training and knowledge and expertise that we could to meet those objectives that we had been tasked to do. So it was a really great lesson in leadership right then and there that I saw was like, This was people giving top-down direction on what needs to be done. And then they let the mid-level people really come up with the best plan of action to achieve those objectives. So it was a real good way to start very early in my career to see like not coming down from the top too much to dictate the tactics so much as the give me the plan and let me go, which is, I think, a good crossover into the construction thing is like, look, tell the guys tell the people what to go build or what to do and let them go do what they do best.
How did you, in terms of leadership positions in your time in the SEALs?
So on my third platoon workup and deployment, at that time, I was the leading petty officer of the platoon, which is the senior E6 in the platoon, which so then all the other folks below me. So I was the head cat herder, for lack of a better term. Our platoon chief was the senior enlisted guy in the platoon. So that was where I was really in an official like leadership position. So that was the first time. And it was great too, because I had such wonderful leadership by that folks that had grew me up to that point. And then in that specific platoon, I had such two great guys with me that had been with me the first two platoons. So they made my life really easy because we grew up together. We were taught kind of the same things. They knew how I worked. I knew how they worked. I knew what they needed. They knew what we needed to do. And they were really great at making that stuff happen. So, and my platoon chief was great.
When you became when you took that leadership position or you achieved that leadership position, what was the biggest mistake you made as a new leader?
Oh my gosh, I don't know how long the podcast is.
Give us the first one that pops into your mind. Maybe one that you're thinking, man, if I could do that one again, that would have been awesome.
Asking more questions and then really starting to dig into more of the higher level stuff to be able to then articulate more to the folks below, like give them the why and what we're doing, the objective, and what more some of the strategic implications, impacts, the operations that we're doing would have on the battlefield, and versus just getting them just ramped back up to go out and do one more op and then get ready for the next op. Really be able to give them more of that background and the why.
So let me ask you about that. So let's say you're super clear on the why. And so then you're on the ground in the battle and the bullets are flying and the decisions are being made. How do you think, in your experience, a clear understanding of the why helps someone when the bullets are flying?
It's important to know really why you're there. Because if there's a real strategic impact on what needs to be done, like why are we out on this target, or why are we after this particular person, or why are we doing what we're doing? So it's, why you're out there. So it's like, we can't just back up and retreat and go away and live to fight another day. Sometimes you can, but a lot of times it's like, look, we got to push forward because there's many other things that are contingent upon us accomplishing this mission. If we don't do this, then all these other subsequent things can't happen.
And so would that be something you would remind one another of in the middle of the battle, or would that be in a sort of a breathing space in the battle? Would you ever verbally communicate that again? Or how did that happen?
It kind of happened organically, especially on the deployment in 2006, where what we would do is we worked very closely with a lot of the Army and Marine that were deployed also there to the city of Ramadi. And we would ensure, like, when they were running big scale operations, and we would be doing things that would be there to support them, like really bringing our folks over as we were going through rehearsals and mission planning with our American counterparts that we were working with, and making sure they understood, like, they knew what the plan was, what the objective was, what we need to accomplish. So then all the follow-on things would come in, and putting those people together. So who the tank driver is that's coming in behind you, or the people that are coming behind you, like, and you can put a face to the name and you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. We got to secure this so they can come do their thing.
Okay, so you mentioned Ramadi there. Just to give the listeners some context, the folks who are involved with you there, because I know people have heard a lot about different SEALs who are involved in that. Are there any of those folks that are publicly known that people may know that you can name so that people get an idea of the context of where you were at and what you were doing?
Yes. So I was deployed with retired Lieutenant Commander Jocko Willink. He was the troop commander for the troop I was in. And Mr. Leif Babin was the officer in charge of the platoon I was in. So the Jocko Willink extreme ownership, I was right there for all of that stuff as they were learning all their fantastic lessons that they brought back and shared with the business community. And then another gentleman, Chris Kyle, was one of my guys. He's actually one of the fellows I referred to a little bit ago that we did. That was our third platoon workup and deployment together.
That's tremendous. So that's helpful for the audience because it gives them some context into what you're thinking there and what you're describing. So after Ramadi, where did you go from there? Obviously, it's like from the construction point of view, it's like the guy or the gal who's been an engineer or a superintendent or a foreman, and they've just been on the ground learning the trade, really understanding what it actually means to get a project built. Where did your career in the SEALs go from there?
From there, I moved over to our training detachment. That's the group that puts all of the SEALs platoons that are going to be deploying through their unit level core competency training. In that, I was the lead for our assault cell, which taught close quarters combat, breaching, and then urban combat, urban movement, things like that. So coming right from that battlefield in '06 to that environment to teach what we learned during that time to the folks that were following behind us.
So did that then take you out of the combat space into the teaching space? Was that a permanent shift for you?
That was a 3-year tour. I did deploy with the SEAL team during that time for about 2 months. But for the most part, that was a month of training and a month between training blocks, getting ready for the next group. But teaching them again. And these were teaching the SEALs that were getting ready to deploy.
Right. And is that typical for a SEAL who has an extended career to eventually transition out of the combat roles into the teaching roles?
Yeah, especially for our instructor cadre, teaching not only the platoons that are going through, and then also some of the support personnel with their requirements, their required training, everything else. And then, or at the schoolhouse as an instructor for the students, which I did a tour there later on in my career. But that is typically what you do. You're operational for a while, you go teach for a while, get back operational. Do it all over again.
Yeah. Okay. So continue to walk us through there. What was the next step for you?
After that, I was able to make another 90-day deployment to Afghanistan in 2010, which place I hadn't been yet. And I spent 90 days there, which was great to see the battle space in a different battle space with the same stuff going on. But that's where I started then to kind of see the correlation of principles versus tactics and how often a lot of times people get hemmed up with the tactics and not with the, not on the principles. I mean, maneuver warfare is pretty simple. Cover, move, flank. It's pretty standard. You do those things differently on flat terrain versus in the mountains. You change the tactic, but the principles don't change. I would always have conversations were funny when people would people would arbitrarily just say like, well, what worked in Iraq won't work in Afghanistan. Like, won't it? Or do we just need to modify the principle and just the tactic to still achieve the same goal?
That's interesting to me because it makes me think of construction, Peter. Maybe you have a thought on this. Is one of the things that makes construction so unique is that every single project is in a different geography and conditions on the ground, the conditions of the working population, et cetera, that it changes the way that you might execute a project. So how do you see that idea of principle and tactics playing together in terms of the construction industry?
I think just like Jeremy described in combat, Eric, and we talked about this a little bit last time I was on your show, there's fundamental principles in construction that are timeless, that move from job to job and move from industry to industry. And one of the cool things that when extreme ownership came out, there were some principles in there that directly applied to construction. There were so many people in our industry that just were attracted to that book because it was sort of speaking our language. So a principle like simplify, keep things simple. You hear that from all of the good construction players. No bad teams, only bad leaders. We see that. You see it at the crew level. You see it at a project level. You see it at a company level. Prioritize and execute. That's one of the things you learn as a young supervisor or young engineer. Like, there's only so much you can get done in a day. How much of it, what's important? What do you do first? What do you do second? How do you get through things? So there's principles that you see as you go through your career that are just timeless. And it doesn't matter where you're building or what you're building. They don't change, and there's something that's going to determine your success or failure.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Jeremy, as you're going through your career here, it sounds like at the beginning, you're someone who's quote unquote in the field. And then as you're moving into the training position, you're becoming the sort of, you know, how in construction you have the dichotomy between the field and the office. And as you're growing in your leadership roles as well, obviously you have people reporting to you. What did you find was changing for you as you became more senior in your leadership role and as you became less involved in the execution of operations on the ground?
Focusing, I think, more on the strategy and backing out of the tactics so much as I started to move up into the higher levels. And I've seen it, Peter verified this as well. A lot of times these conversations happen in the construction space as well. They're talking, strategy against tactics. It seems like a lot of the times the conversation devolves because of tactics. Like, you want to do something a certain way and I want to do something else differently. It's like, well, is it my position to even worry about the tactics that you're doing? Do you know the objective that you were tasked to accomplish? Then go forth and do it. One of the best things I've learned as I was a new instructor teaching the SEALs how to go through stuff, because I was only taught one way or a few ways, a few certain times. But as we're moving through the training cycles and you start seeing things, people want to try new things like, hey, maybe this is the way we taught it. Like, maybe we try something else different. Like, really, someone told me, it's like, look, is it safe? And does it make sense? The tactic that they might want to try or innovate, or just like, if it makes sense and they can safely execute it, let them try it. Worst case that happens, it doesn't work here in training. We can maybe modify it a little bit, come up with something that does work, or we're like, wow, it sounded great on paper. In practicality, did not work out at all. But now we know. You got to give those folks that environment and that space to be innovative and be creative and come up with a different way to try out the problem. Just make sure you're applying sound ORM.
What do you mean by ORM?
Operational risk management. Another one of those fantastic principles that bleeds over from warfare training into construction. Safety.
So for the audience, just explain ORM in simple terms, just so that we can kind of grasp that.
Sure. Operational risk management. So construction is a dangerous job. Training for war is a dangerous job. War is a dangerous job. But we have to train to do it. We put people in dangerous positions in training. We put people in dangerous positions on construction sites. So do the best you can to mitigate the risks. You make sure that the people have been properly trained. They have the right equipment to safely execute what needs to get done. And you train them as best you can and you send them out to do what they do. But just really identifying the risk. How can we mitigate that? And you find an acceptable level of risk if we can buy down some of that risk. And we're like, yep, this juice is now worth the squeeze. So let's go for it. And sometimes it's too risky. If the sea state's too high, we're not going to do that jump tonight into the water because it's just not worth it. And we'll reschedule and we'll live to fight another day.
So when you were coming up in the teams, that idea of presenting an idea and then the superior asking the questions, is it safe? Does it make sense? Was that something they did for you so that you learned that process? Or was that something you had to learn yourself when you came into a more senior position?
Again, I've had wonderful leadership and mentorship for my entire career. Like someone shared that nugget of knowledge with me. And I don't know who shared it with them. It may be as old as time. Who knows? Just let the folks down there. Like just because the folks wrote some tactic or something in a manual somewhere doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. Take the principles that are learned and maybe we can apply it in a different way. Maybe we can modify it a little bit. Encourage people to be creative.
Peter, how have you seen that practically in your experience in construction? How have you seen that work out or even not work out?
Yeah, maybe not work out is something to talk about first, because I think we've all seen it. If you've ever been on a site or been involved in a company where the people sort of in the headquarters or in the office or far from the field are trying to run the work, micromanage, it's a disaster. They don't know what's going on. No one really likes working for that kind of company or on that kind of project. Frankly, no matter how smart they are or think they are, they don't have the information that they need to run the job. So the best run projects are the ones where you set up your crews for success and you get everything out of the way that you can, put the right teams in place, you give them the right training, and then you turn them loose to do their thing. Now, obviously, you support them and you monitor and you track it, but if someone's sitting in the office somewhere calling game day audibles, trying to do day-to-day direction, recipe for failure.
That's interesting. So, Jeremy, as you were growing, it's interesting. You're going from a guy who's got his hand in the dirt, so to speak, into a guy who's not so much in the dirt, but is training the guys who are in the dirt. And then I have this picture in my mind of sort of the military bureaucracy that you begin to interact with in a greater way. Is that a true picture in my mind where I'm thinking, man, it's challenging for someone like you who came to do elite stuff with elite people, and all of a sudden you get into roles where you're coming up against, well, this is the way we've always done it, and I don't even care if it's safe or makes sense. We ain't doing it that way. How did you handle that, or did you ever experience anything like that?
I think anyone who's ever worked in a big organization has experienced something similar to that. One of the things that I was finding is the way we've always done it, that's a very dangerous statement. Typically, a lot of people if that's the way they're explaining why they're doing something, then they don't know it. And maybe we should really stop and take a look at what we're doing and why. And maybe it does make sense, but at least we're taking that pause, making sure our risk management is up to date. We're yeah, this still makes sense. Or maybe we really should look at it again.
Well, let me ask you this then. In your experience in the SEALs, and I think people can reflect on how this impacts their business as well. In your experience in the SEALs, what were the areas where this is the way we've always done it, and because of who we are and what we stand for, we're not going to change this? In other words, these are our core principles or core values that aren't about the tactics and the way we execute a mission, but it's about who we are as people or what our overall big picture mission is. What are those things in the SEAL teams that are unchanging?
I think the only thing that you can really say that the only thing that's unchanging is the environment's always changing. Where we've been deploying SEALs and just the U.S. military in general the last 20 years, that's gone way down now. Withdraw from Afghanistan, withdraw from Iraq. So now that we're kind of in a newer environment of where it's really kind of unpredictable, there's a lot of potential out there for bad things to happen. And when you don't really know what can happen, the best thing to do is kind of go back to those basics. Make sure that you have control of things that you can control so that when something changes that we have to address, we don't have to spend time worrying about the basics. Just making sure that we have just as an example, just folks, your weapons are sighted in, your equipment is ready to go, your basic patrolling formations are down. Everyone knows the hand and arm signals. Everyone knows how to program and use their radio. Everyone knows how to use the software to do a terrain study, do the mapping, do whatever else. So everyone knows how to do those things. So now when something happens, we're now we have to do some mission planning, mission analysis for this specific area right here. Okay, well, people can go to that and start looking at that information, not have to okay, come over, let me show you guys how to use the software to do it.
Let me ask you a different way. I had the privilege of attending your retirement ceremony a few weeks ago in San Diego, and I was struck by this sort of the order of ceremonies. And there was at one point where a poem, or it was almost a hymn, was read out. And it was the one about the American flag and the different places that the American flag had been over a couple of hundred years. You could see how there was a certain thread that moved across time and across circumstance that tied together the history of the United States. And so in thinking about that, I was thinking, what are those timeless principles that influence the way that you acted and behaved in the Navy SEALs that didn't change regardless of the tactics or the strategy or the battle space?
So the Old Glory hymn to which you're referring lists all these battles from over 200 years of American history, from Gettysburg all the way to what's happening today. So the principles of honor, courage, selfless sacrifice for the person beside you, those things shouldn't change. They should never change. And really taking it back to the American flag, that's this country. That's something bigger than yourself, something bigger than the team that you're assigned to, something bigger than the coast that you're on, even bigger than just being in the Navy. I'm connected now with every veteran who's ever worn a uniform, from Air Force, Marines, every single one of them, my brothers and sisters out there. And that's something bigger than all of us, something that'll endure. It was here long before we got here, and it'll be here longer after we leave.
So that's very interesting because, Peter, let me ask you, how do you think that kind of mindset of legacy or of significance can impact the running of a construction business?
You see that same kind of character and thought pattern in the great enduring companies. There's a higher level of purpose. There's a legacy. Even if it's a newer company, there's an understanding of the history of the business and the things that don't change. And so we talked last time about great companies, and these great companies, if you look at it, the leaders know their history. They have principles that haven't changed. And there's a core to that business that has stayed the same. And that core is the foundation that their success is built on.
So it seems like that the best companies are very good at identifying and articulating that and communicating it to the people who work for them and making sure that their businesses are run within those principles, and yet within the principles themselves, allowing a lot of space for the innovation that we've been talking about and that you found to be so effective during your career, Jeremy, in the SEALs. Give us, what date are we at now with your career? At what point? We're around 2010, 2012?
Yeah, I spent 2010, 2012, I spent as a instructor at the schoolhouse working with the students, and 2 years instructing and getting the students ready to send them over to the teams after they graduated. So it was really to be there around the folks that are just sponges constantly, just wanting all the information. Really cool to be there.
Can I ask you a quick question about that? Did you notice any difference in the quality or the temperament of the new guys from your time, from 1999 to, let's say, 2010, 2012, that kind of period? Was there any difference, or is it the selection process of the SEALs, just they kind of get the same folks across time?
Major differences? No, I think you still, obviously there's been a lot more press and spotlight on the NSW community in the last 20 or so years, so we have a much higher profile than we did when I came in. But for the most part, no. I mean, even the folks that came in now 10 years ago when I was an instructor, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that was 10 years ago. They came in for the same reasons I did. There, a lot of them, they seemed like they just want to be part of an elite group of people that doing elite things, and with people that they knew had their back. That is probably one of the most comforting things about NSW was you knew that like everyone they wanted to be there. They wanted to be the best they could, be the best version of themselves, be the best operator, whatever else. And you knew that they had your back no matter what. So like I could just worry about the stuff in front of me because they've got me covered.
Okay. Now, Peter, let me ask you this in terms of a construction company then. From what I'm hearing from Jeremy is that if your culture is consistent, then that'll help you to attract the right types of people and then repel the wrong types of people, regardless of what the generational differences may or may not be. What is your experience of that in terms of construction?
I think every company has a culture, whether they're intentional about it or not. And that company's culture is reflected in its people. And you can see companies that have good culture based on how long their people are there, the talent that they attract, the talent that they continue to attract. And then you can see the reverse. You can see the companies that have high turnover, that struggle to keep people, that have problems. And it's because they're not intentional with their culture. I mean, we thought over the last year, one of the things that we did was we thought really hard about, first of all, what is our culture? What is culture? And we just defined it as, well, culture is the way that we think and act. And so when we started putting together our core values, we started first with the culture and defined our culture. And that was one of the things that sort of connected at a root, like Jeremy and I in business, was culturally and fundamentally, we were so aligned.
How did you guys meet?
So Jeremy's wife is in the industry. She was a longtime utility executive and entrepreneur. And my company Live Oak was talking to her business about partnering on a proposal. And we just really connected and said, there's something more here than just this job. We should all meet. And we just brought my family down to San Diego. We met Erica and Jeremy and their family and just started talking. And from that, we created our business.
That's great. And what is your business focused on?
So our business right now is focused on utility construction. We're in California, and the people in California, even outside of California, see the challenges our state is having with things like wildfires, renewable energy, an outdated power grid. And we've created Radix to solve those challenges for our customers.
And for you, Jeremy, I want to make sure I don't forget the time that you spent at the headquarters. But as you were beginning to think about transitioning out of the Navy, because you reached 23 years of service, why didn't you go for 30 in the Navy? Why did you decide now was the time to try something different?
The decision at this point was it definitely had longer term effects. If I would have stayed in another year or two, like at that point, I'd have been at 25 years. And like you said, like, why not stay until 30? So if I really wanted to get out and try something new, I'm 41 years old now and I retired. I got time to get something done. So there was that. It's a time of transition also, I think, with just in the military in general, just shifting out of Afghanistan and Iraq into what the future holds. It just felt like the right time. Like just things are transitioning and it's a good time. Family wise, my oldest started high school this year as a military person and as a father, I'm going to get all 4 years of my oldest high school career. I get to spend that time and there's no way I get to make that up. But the opportunity that presented itself with Peter, where everything was headed, and plus families, it just felt right. Plus, last thing I'll say is like after that meeting with Peter, like really being aligned with someone else and as we were looking to build something, that was really appealing to me, was building something, not just becoming part of big established corporation or big entity or whatever else and going in and fixing someone else's broken culture or their broken processes. Like it's easier to build it right than just to try and fix a bad one. So the challenge of it was very appealing to me.
Then let's pivot back then. So 2018, you got into a different role. Can you describe that a little bit and what that was like?
Yeah, that was the last 4 years of my career. I spent at the headquarters of Naval Special Warfare. So I got to work for the admirals in charge of everything. So I work on the staff for the admiral as his force training and readiness officer. So working to help develop and implement training plans force-wide with our recruitment and assessment commands of who we want to bring into the community, all the way through certification and getting folks final approvals and ready to go out the door and everything in between. So
let me just interrupt you. Were you in meetings with the admiral and the top dog, so to speak?
Occasionally, but most part, I was like, my job was really to prepare, help my boss he'd be the one in there briefing the admiral on training objectives, things like that. I was his action arm and working with my counterparts at the subsequent commands to help implement and monitor and document and validate and inspect, and all the training objectives were being completed and they were in accordance with the admiral's desire.
Was that a big step up for you in terms of, did you feel like when you came into that role, how did you feel? Were you like, yeah, I got this, I'm going to nail it? Or because some people, when they come into new roles, they got promoted because, dude, they're ballers and ballers ball. So let's promote this guy and let him go and figure it out. But you get in that role and you can feel a little insecure or a little unsure of yourself. What did it feel like when you went into that new role? That
was definitely a big transition going from where I was at team, even though I was at the team working as a training officer at one team. So I just had one team to focus on, now going up to the headquarters where I would be engaging with basically everybody across the coast. Was a lot, but you go in with an attitude of, I'm going to do the best I can because this is what is supporting the folks on the ground. And like reminded myself, I'm sure many years ago, someone was sitting in that exact same seat doing that job that allowed me to do the things that I was able to do. So now it's my turn to do the best I can to set the conditions and help the folks that are going out the door now to be the best that they can be.
What did you like most about your service as that force training officer at the headquarters?
Sitting at that level and seeing the decision-making process that goes into things that affect folks from that higher up, that 50,000 foot perspective, as your things change, like what's important to one department or one group or one team that's not as important to the other one. And like, where's the priority? And like just seeing all the various things, all the factors and facets that go into the decision-making process and just learning how those things get done was incredible. Just learning how to sift through a bureaucratic morass. I like to call it administrative warfare.
Administrative warfare. So what's the difference between administrative warfare and actual warfare? I mean, and there's obvious ones, but in terms of the way you approached it from a strategic and a tactical thinking perspective, what were the differences?
Well, just invest the time to learn the culture, learn how things get done, learn the processes, and learn the procedures, learn the rules. Typically, and to any of your folks listening who may have a military background, and especially coming from Naval Special Warfare side of the house, like no one's ever in chest deep water in January, freezing dreaming about doing staff work. That is not what people join to do, but it's all part of the bigger strategic planning picture. And you have to, that's your job to do. Even if you don't like the job so much, it's like, I need to do it the best I can so I can provide my boss the information that he needs to inform the admiral to make those decisions. So just in an effort, just trying to go back to do the best you can and be great at your job and just try to make it better than how you found it.
So let's just look back at your whole career. And what I'd like you just to share with the audience is your biggest regret and your greatest triumph from the years that you spent in the SEALs.
Looking back on now, the biggest regret, just from maybe being more effective on it, like really taking the time to learn, read, and find out how things are supposed to be done before you just run off and try to make something happen through a backdoor channel or I know this person, I can call them and I can make this stuff happen. That's not sustainable, and it winds up usually makes the process and things take longer and cost more money. So if I had something to make me a better, more efficient operator, investing the time to really do the research on how to be more effective and more efficient maneuvering through the military itself, and something as weird as it sounds, I actually really began to enjoy that process the last couple of years I was in there at the headquarters. Once you start to pull apart that, you can start pulling that thread a little bit of how to make things happen. And then you get some momentum going and you're like, oh, this is cool. We're learning how to be efficient.
Let me just ask, Peter, as you're thinking about what Jeremy was just saying and how that might translate into someone's career in a construction company or the construction industry, how might that idea of sort of learning the organization and how things work as opposed to sort of doing the bull in the china shop thing, how might that apply to someone who's in a construction company?
The bull in the china shop seems to happen all the time. I mean, I know I was that when I was younger, and you see, especially in a lot of high performers early in their careers, they think that they have to have that personality and mentality to be successful. And they're really focused on their own performance and just sort of getting the job done. And a lot of times it just works against them. And so it's so helpful to be able to give people perspective of the bigger picture, the mission of the company, what we're trying to accomplish. And really, it's especially for newer people, it's not their job to figure out. It's the company's job to teach them that.
Excellent. And then pivoting back to you, Jeremy, what would you say is your biggest accomplishment or sense of pride that you have from your involvement in the teams?
The promotions and the advancement and the growth of the people I worked with. And not just from the SEALs that I got to put through training and watch them get their tridents pinned on and everything, but all the amazing people I had the opportunity and to work with and grow with. Just seeing the folks get promoted, seeing them get into a new leadership position, just seeing people grow, that was really rewarding for me.
I want to ask you one thing, and this is just based on a very short amount of time interacting with you and with other folks down at your retirement ceremony. And I was struck by, I was trying to describe it, I was struck by almost by the humility of the operators or the former operators that I met. And what I mean by that is like, there's almost, I'm going to use this word here, and I think it just help me with this. There's almost a sweetness about some of you guys. And it kind of struck me in a weird way because you don't expect that. It's like I talked to Jocko after the ceremony, right? Because my boy was like, dude, you got to get a photo with Jocko, man. You got to get a photo. So I'm not the kind of guy who wants to go and talk to Jocko. You know what I'm saying? Although I like the stuff he does. And so I go up to him and I say, hey, my boy will kill me unless I get a photo with you, right? And he says, oh, sure, yeah, I'll give you a photo. And he's totally normal. He's not like some highfalutin dude. And he's like, well, what does your boy do? And I'm like, he asked me what my boy did. But then when I was interacting with you and the other guys, again, the sense of sweetness and humility, which is weird to me. I mean, that's what it came, not weird in a bad way, but just like, wow, that's interesting. Is that a true perspective that I had there? Do you see that with the guys that you know and that you worked with for so many years?
The best ones, yes. There is. There's having a humble attitude and a growth mindset and just trying to be the best that we can, but knowing that we can always be better is a great way to live life. As soon as you start thinking that you're the best at something and I can't learn anything from you, you can't teach me something, you're probably not going to be a value-added person to the organization anymore because you're not going to contribute anything and you're just going to dig your heels in and fight any changes or anything new that's going to come along. So, and it's another great mentor I had told me something along the lines of like every group, no matter how elite, has a bottom 10%. So, I mean, there's, as far as a SEAL platoon goes or a construction crew or whatever, there's always, you do your best to bring people in. Some people are just genetically engineered to hate everything and nothing's ever good enough. And hopefully those folks decided this isn't for them and they move on, and maybe construction wasn't for them. Maybe being a SEAL wasn't for them, or maybe it wasn't what they had in mind. It wasn't what they expected. Being in the SEAL teams, like you just alluded to, is like the reality was a lot different than what you thought it was. And I think that happens a lot of times with folks that come into naval special warfare or maybe even in construction. They thought it was one thing and it turns out it was something completely different. They become disenfranchised and they're like, well, the worst part is like those folks they hang around with their bad attitude.
Right. That's interesting. So, Peter, just kicking it over to you with that thought, because I think it really is. I mean, obviously, it's a reality. There's always the bottom 10%, and they're always there. How does a construction executive manage that bottom 10%, knowing that some of them, they're going to have to be on the job site because we've signed a contract and we got to build the work. And yet, I'm never going to settle. I always need to be working on the upgrading of my team. How does that dynamic work from your experience, Peter, in construction?
It's always there, and there's no really getting rid of it. But at the same time, you can't ignore it. And from our perspective, the most important reason not to ignore it is for the other 90%. There's nothing worse than your good people knowing that you're willing to keep bad people around. And for us, it's something that we're very mindful of. We're always making sure that we're not injuring our good people because of the bad ones.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I found this conversation very interesting. Peter, just tell me a little bit, as you are partnering up with Jeremy, what is your main motivation for partnering specifically with Jeremy? What are you hoping that he brings to the table from his experiences that will help the business to grow in the construction space?
We know, you talk to anybody in construction, you say, what's construction all about? And it's all about people. What is it all about to be successful with people? It really comes down to sort of leadership and culture. And this is something that Jeremy has in spades. It's something that Naval Special Warfare has in spades. And so for us, taking those lessons and that talent and really applying it all the way to crew level within the organization is something that I think is very unique, and we're so excited to do. Extreme Ownership is a great book, and it really helped me as a young manager. But I have to tell you, there's so many principles that have come from Jeremy's experience that we just can't wait to share with everybody. And what the SEALs would call the action arm, we call our crews. And we are going to take that knowledge base and those principles and apply it across the whole organization.
It's excellent. So how can people learn more about your company and what you guys do?
Sure. Our website's radixservices.com. We're also on LinkedIn. We're happy to check us out there, and you can get in touch with us on both platforms.
Well, gentlemen, I tell you, I found this interview very informative, Jeremy. I really appreciate you taking the time to go into some details there and some just in your experiences. I'm looking forward to getting both of you guys back on the pod as the business continues to grow, to learn more about what you guys are doing to impact the construction industry. And I just want to thank you, Jeremy and Peter, for coming back on the program here today.
Thanks for having us, Eric. I hope we can do it again soon.
Our pleasure, Eric.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to today's episode with Jeremy and Peter. Hope you found it useful. Feel free to check out their website, radixservices.com. Connect with them on LinkedIn. This episode of the podcast was brought to you by Construction Genius, the book. Oh, yes. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. To get a copy of the book and to learn more about it, go out to constructiongeniusbook.com. There you'll find a description of the book and a big fat buy now button. So click on the button, and for $20, you can get yourself a book that gives you insights that could make you or save you millions. And the reason why is because people problems are costing your construction company millions. And in the book, you will learn how to solve those problems. Thank you again for listening. Feel free to check out the book and buy one for you and your leadership team. If you are in the greater Sacramento area and you buy the book, shoot me an email and I will personally come by your office and sign the copies for you. If you're in the greater Bay Area, let me know. And the next time I'm down there visiting my clients, I will come by your office and I will sign them for you. And you never know, if you're somewhere else in the country and I happen to be traveling and meeting my clients, let me know and I will come into your office and personally sign the books for you. Thanks again for listening today. And I look forward to catching you on the next Construction Genius podcast episode.